Well, if you're watching on video, you have already noticed I'm joined by a guest. And if you're watching on video, you probably already know who my guest is. In fact, maybe more of you know who my guest is than know who I am, which is just fine. Sean, who are you?
So I'm Sean, and I am a tabletop role-playing gamer, game master, con goer, and produced a podcast, co-hosted a podcast called Gaming and BS for about 7 years, weekly, for 7 years, about 400 episodes with my co-host Brett. And then we purposely sunset that. We didn't pod fade. We said, hey, we're going to end. We ended. And now since then, I've done GM Mastermind, who Anthony has pleasantly been on in the past. It didn't go very far. I found that
I think I was the last episode.
it might have been. I found that interviewing people is a bit of a challenge and interesting with scheduling.
Sure.
But it had some really good people on that show. It's still out there. And then I've done some actual plays as I record some of the games that I've been involved with. And then most recently, I've launched with a partner of mine here again, Go Bag, which is an espionage-based role-playing game, espionage and covert ops. So I think we've got 6 or 7 episodes out there now, and whenever this drops, there may be an 8th out there. Anyways, so that's me. That's me in a nutshell. I stream every Saturday morning at 8 time US, and for about an hour, interact with the live chat and just kind of ramble about role-playing games. There'll be a main topic, and then typically go into news and print and crowdsourcing and things of that nature. So
it's a lot of fun.
It is. I enjoy it much. It's the live stream format for me is just something that interests me more, and the chat puts fuel in the tank. Otherwise, it probably would have ended years ago. But they show up at 8 in the morning, and some, 6 in the morning U.S. time, some Australian time. It's and kind of hang out and ramble amongst each other. Also, right, there's that interaction. But yeah, it's fun.
It's a lot easier for me to join in usually because it's late in my evening. But yeah, I just listened yesterday to the first top secret episode of Go Bag. And I'm looking forward to Jason Connerly of Nerds RPG Variety Cast to respond to the shots fired about first edition Top Secret, and not really shots fired, but questions asked. But yeah,
he has hooked us up with somebody who is a bit of a Top Secret aficionado.
Oh,
yes, and this person has been on Jason's show. He said, I'll put you in contact with him. He's run Top Secret, and he runs it by the book. And, he put us in contact with him, and he's willing to run it for us. Now, I think that's good and bad. Like, it's good that he's willing to do it. It's bad that I won't sit down and actually do it myself and drive myself crazy. So
it's kind of good to see both sides of the screen, right?
It is. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes.
I'm looking forward to it. It's fun. It launched around the time that I started my annual rewatch of the British television show Sandbaggers, which I don't know if you had ever seen before.
I have watched an episode or two, but I haven't binged it and gotten through the whole thing. But I know I think majority or all are on YouTube, right?
Now, yeah, there's a YouTube channel called Forgotten British Television or something, which has posted all of them in a very nice form, and clear audio and yeah, it's a treat to take you back to 1970s Cold War paranoia and Whitehall shenanigans.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the filming because they'll film outside in, whatever resolution, right? And then when they get inside, it's very studio. So it's got that break. It's very odd.
But nostalgic at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
But I keep thinking of you in connection with it because of your interest in Delta Green. And I find watching Sandbaggers, and I keep meaning to do a video on this, but if you're just getting into Delta Green and you're worried about how bonds should work, especially like the initial bonds before the character's really involved heavily in Delta Green, watching Sandbaggers is such a potent way to look at the absolute ruin that espionage and counter espionage can have on a person's life, those kind of responsibilities and whatnot. It's a fascinating character study that I think you could then, give real weight to your play of Delta Green if you wanted to take it in that direction. Because that's my favorite part of Delta Green is how broken all these people are or are about to be.
Yeah, it is a game that I appreciate and is one of my favorites. And I've run quite a few sessions, and it is the bond component that helps. That's the difference between Delta Green and Call of Cthulhu, amongst other things, right? You don't just go insane and you go insane and die. Kind of a common Call of Cthulhu mantra. But with Delta Green, you can offset that sanity loss by projecting it on bonds, and it's really the downward spiral of the human spirit is really what it
Yeah,
is. And if people appreciate that journey, it's great. But there's people that don't and
it's a
won't.
little heavy.
And yeah, and it won't be their game. I've mentioned this to Harrigan even before we started Go Bag, that it takes a unique mindset to get into Delta Green, because if you don't understand the premise very well, it will feel disjointed.
Sure.
Like a buddy of mine, created a character, and you know, you in Delta Green you have some type of connection to the extraterrestrial or you know paranormal or something. You've had an experience that's the reason they tap you and recruit you. And I said, well, what's your character? What does he do? Oh, I'm an army major. Great. I'm a helicopter pilot. He's the best pilot. He's the best pilot. Great pilot. And I said, well, why did Delta Green recruit you? Well, because I'm the best. I can make sure I get people where they need to. And to me, it's just not, that's not what it is.
It's
And
Delta Force. Yeah.
yeah, you still have to have a connection to when you encounter, the cosmic
What?
horror.
Yeah. What moved you to the inside? Yeah.
Why do you continue? Otherwise, you're just a great pilot. They're going to find somebody else after you say, I'm getting the GTFO, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah. And this is a cool segue into our actual topic of the evening, right? What I wanted to talk to Sean about, everybody, was preparation, long form preparation for campaigns for games like this, games like Delta Green or Call of Cthulhu or your particular flavor of cosmic horror, where there are other layers going on than just the elements of the adventure, so to speak. There are emotional components that we need to be aware of, may or may not affect the characters and the people around them, all that sort of fallout, that kind of thing. And so the type of preparation that we do has to be quite different from what we might do at a convention, let's say where we're doing a one shot or an introductory game. And you just came back from GameOldCon, right?
I did. Yeah. It's a 4-day gaming convention in Madison, Wisconsin, which is in my backyard.
Yeah. Did you run anything?
I ran a game of Shadow Dark of all things. And it was because I threw it up there because I had used the scenario in a West Marches game. So I just said,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'll take this set piece, sit down and run it, kind of a dungeon crawl.
Either 3 hour or 4 hour sessions?
The off grid ones tend to be a little bit shorter, I would say. And then most of the other ones were 4 hours. Yeah.
Right. So the preparation for a 4 hour event, vastly different than we're going to be playing this for the next year or two, or there's no forecast end to the campaign. So when you ran your, as you said, dungeon crawl, what was from a preparation point of view, what was your point? What were you preparing to do for the players who signed up?
I came up with a CATS document. So concept, aim, tone, subject matter is kind of an abbreviated session zero. Like this is what we're going to, so what we're going to do is the tone of the game. And then, who's played it. Okay.
Hands up.
Well, half the table, 3/4 of the table. Great. All right. Here's the deal. Started the entrance of catacombs. Go. But otherwise, it was pretty minimal. I didn't have to remember the plot. It's a,
Dungeon crawl. Yeah.
That's a dungeon crawl. There's no NPCs and motivations, and I'm not worried about where the characters are going to go. Like in Delta Green, it can be very this way or that way. It's they're going to go down a hallway, and there's going to be two rooms. It's
Pick one.
three
Yeah.
choices. Yeah.
So that gives us pretty good context. If most of the people had put up their hands to say we've never played Shadowdark before, we've never played anything D&D adjacent before, would it have segued into a teaching experience rather than the kind of in-character experience or the tactical experience of the dungeon crawl?
I think so. I think it depends on how many of those individuals are at the table, right? If it's three quarters or all, a little bit different. Um, but I think out of the six, four have played Shadow Dark. Um, and of those four, I think three of them play it quite a lot, quite a bit.
So they just wanted to play.
They just wanted to play and have a good time, I guess. Right? It's kind of sometimes with these, it's more, beer and pretzels type of approach, nothing too crazy or serious.
Sure. Especially with other tables within earshot and everybody yelling. And there's a certain
Right.
type of experience that you need to prep for, and a very short time limit in order to make your impact, whatever that is going to be. All right, so Shadow Dark is cool. I got 4 hours to have you walking away from the table thinking Shadow Dark is cool, or I too can play this game. That kind man Sean showed me how.
Yeah, I would be interested to know how it is to run for people that have never played an RPG, because I would say I didn't survey the table, but I would have to think that everybody at the table has played 5e. And if you've played 5e and you've never played Shadow Dark, it's, the point of reference is that the gap is not that wide and it's very
Right.
easy. So instead of skills, you do ability checks, add your modifier against the DC. That's it. Like it's not a list of skills, which makes things even more abbreviated.
It's just a lateral step over.
Yeah.
But when we talk about long form play, like, hey, I've got this rather large hardcover book, right? You don't need to know the title of it, but it's Delta Green, and maybe none of you have played modern Delta Green before. Maybe you played it back long ago under normal Call of Cthulhu rules, but we're going to give this a try. Things shift quite a bit, right?
They do. No doubt. A
So,
lot. Yeah.
what made you choose Impossible Landscapes when that came around? Other than the fact that it's, awesome, but
It was one of the first campaigns for Delta Green.
yeah,
Everything else before it, leading up to it, were all single scenarios. In the intention was it was a single scenario, not that it would be played in a single session,
a single session, yeah,
right? But it was the first kind of full length campaign, um, and so I read it, and I was not. It's very much based on the King in Yellow, which is a little bit different than Lovecraft. So if people are used to Lovecraft and Call of Cthulhu, the King in Yellow has some similar. It's ancient, it's old, it's weird, nobody understands it, but it's different.
yeah.
You know, and so it was my first exposure to Carcosa and the King in Yellow and some of that. Um, it wasn't something that I had read and researched and been a fan of or read the book.
Prior to, did you read it during prep or during play or after?
I didn't. And the funny thing is as part of the Kickstarter, one of the rewards was the King in Yellow annotated.
Yeah.
And I got that after I completed the campaign. So now I have it. And I've been meaning to read it, but I haven't. So it's on my to do list. So
How far down, down your to-do
pretty
list
far,
is that?
pretty far
Pretty
down
far.
on the list right now.
Well, I can give it a pretty strong recommendation.
Yeah,
It's intense.
I bet. I bet. But it was its first campaign. I wanted to run something a little bit longer form in Delta Green because I think at Delta Green, it's more contemporary, modern, set in the modern era. Whether it's in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 2000s, whatever that is.
Right.
The one shots are interesting, but you don't see the bonds develop or fall apart or
Yeah.
um, the changes in the character over a significant amount of time in game.
Right. You play the one assignment, and then you go through the end stage of dealing with the characters, such as adjusting your bonds and the like, and then you're done. So you're already checking out, you know, when that process is happening, but not in campaign play where we can really see this game start to sink its teeth. Yeah.
I had a really great player, and I don't know if now is the time to talk about it, but when he started the game and as it went through, he conveying his character had changed
Mm,
dramatically. It was fantastic, and he's a super player. He's played with Craig Shipman before and streamed on his stream. His name's Lou, Feeling Good Lewis is his Discord handle, and he gets into it, you know, pretty deep, where his character starts as an eager person that's like, "Ooh, I'm excited to get into this investigation. Yeah, I'm part of Delta Green. All right, cool." And then he's the one that loses it, and then there's a time forward that goes 10 years into the future, and when
right.
his character comes out of that 10 years, he's writing books based on his scenario, or based on his adventures that he had gone through as a player character,
Right.
as
Nice.
a third person, thinking that that wasn't him. So it's like dissociative disorder. It's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. So when you first looked at it, you said, "Okay, I'm going to run this." And Delta Green's Impossible Landscapes is, among other things, quite surreal in places. Um, I think that opens up the question of how am I going to run this? Like in practical terms, how am I going to run this? What environment am I going to be playing in? Who is the final list of players? What are the characters? How is this going to be done? So, how did you approach it?
As I read most of the book, not even all of it,
From front to some stopping point, or
from
just
front
random
to about,
sections?
yeah, from the beginning to about three quarters in. And then I thought, well, once we get to that, or even close, I'll start reading the end pages, if you will. The first scenario, and I guess when I, even just started picking it up and paging through it and reading it, Delta Green can be quite dense
Mm,
as it relates to like some of the history, because there's quite a bit, even in the Handler's Guide, one of the core books. There's barely any rules in it at all. It's just
right.
the history of Delta Green, and it's a few hundred pages, 8.5 by 11. It's a history book for Delta Green.
And it's context for your decisions as the handler. Yeah.
Yes, it has factions in it and things you can use for carving your own campaign or one shots. So with Impossible Landscapes, I kind of just absorbed it all. And then when I was about to kick it off, then I would make some notes about who some of the NPCs are, what the characters are going to start off with, because it all starts typically with the mission brief. And then from there it can go in many different directions. And usually
Directions.
it'll start out with a very small amount. And then as the scenario goes and they start moving forward, they can go anywhere. They really can. And it's because we have such a frame of reference to the modern day. So anything that comes to their mind, if they can Google it or bring it up on the internet or walk down a street or understand the hours of a store and when it's open and how long it takes for them to get there and how to get there via taxi or Uber, like all that is player knowledge. So they can
Yeah.
apply that at Delta Green, which makes it really interesting to GM.
Yeah. They can do anything. Yeah. All right. So, how many people were you preparing for?
So I think I had started with five or six players. I wouldn't go any more than six. And I think there was one that couldn't make it. There was another person who played for a couple sessions and then realized like I'm not going to be able to make it consistently, the schedule, and they dropped. So I think in the end I had three players pretty consistently through three quarters of the campaign.
Right. Was completing it either to its like printed resolutions or to, you know, the Sean resolution of it based on play. Was completing it one of your goals from the beginning?
I mean, it was initially is to get through it and see, if we could get to the end. But due to players' actions, it may come to an end, but it may not come to the end of what is considered, that is written in the book.
Right.
And that's how it kind of wrapped up for us, where things got violent. Um, and I think we had played long enough where I thought this is kind of the end and where it should stop. But the thing is with the King in Yellow and the campaign itself is that when you wrap it up, it doesn't really end. It's one of the movie scenes that leaves you with it's not over.
Right. Yeah. The top spinning on the end of the table.
Exactly. Right. The one character or the NPCs that are encountered but are different at the end of the campaign, and one of the characters is in a psych ward and the other one shows up to visit him, but it's not, and then there'll be a sign that comes up that things still linger.
Right. Always leave them wanting more.
Is it really the end?
So with that, and at the point where you started the campaign, having not read the end, you didn't really know it was going in that direction, or you did?
I did. I think when I got towards, as they progressed through the campaign, I would look ahead to where they were. And at that point, I could determine how far I needed to read. Because one other thing that I would realize is, okay, it's time to prep, sit down, take some notes, reread what's going on. Here's, I think, what may happen, because they're given clues X, Y, and Z, which could lead them in those directions. There's always 1, 2, and 3 that will come out of the, nowhere. And so you kind of have an idea of which paths they'll choose. So you can kind of prep and understand what they'll run into. And then once they do, you can kind of elaborate that, play out those couple scenes. And that may be the entire session. So what happens is I would read and realize they would get in. And it happens with many games that I run that are longer term campaigns, is I'll prep. And what I've prepped is more than what will take place in the session. Because you kind of think, well, they'll probably get through this, they'll probably get through that. And then what happens is they don't. They sit there and talk more, they explore more, right?
Right.
They decide to argue amongst themselves to determine what to do, and that takes another hour. And before you know it, they didn't get close to going past, point X, which is great. Then you have that knowledge for the next session.
Next time.
Yeah.
And it gives you a good sense of confidence about this session, right?
Yeah. You feel better, like, okay, now they are in the moment. Things are going well. I mean, well, game wise.
Yeah.
And you don't have
for
to
their characters.
Right. And you don't have to sit down and struggle and go, okay. They went through everything. Now I got to come up with something else. Or, they zigged.
Or just stop.
Or just stop. Right. Yeah. I didn't prep that. Can we stop right now so I can figure out what to present to you guys quick,
I tend to think that like a universal truth about preparation, like one of the core ideas is that whoever the game master is feels, I want to use the word confident, but I'm going to use the word ready or able. It's possible they can run the session, right? We move from, well, I can't run that now, to, oh, okay, I can run that now, to, yeah, I can run that now. Somewhere on that spectrum is an important part of preparation. And in a modern scenario like Delta Green, there's so much you don't have to prepare, like you were talking about. But some people among us might still want to turn this into a vast amount of prep. Like, I need to have maps of different warehouses in case they go to a warehouse, and different office spaces in case they go to an office space. And I need lots of icons or avatars of different characters' faces so I can, It could turn into an insurmountable amount of prep if you let it, or it could be not enough prep. You know, if you're that. So where did you end up?
So I think I took a bunch of images from the book and the PDF so that if they ran into an NPC, I could bring them up and show them who it is. Because there's a lot of clues and handouts within the campaign. So I think I took those and set them aside and put them in a folder and granted access to the players using a VTT because it was a virtual game.
Right.
And, I didn't go in it. Some people, if they run Delta Green, they'll do face to face and they'll do props, and props are fantastic, but that's, another time component. So sometimes that might be too much. Other times people love doing it and they'll do the most exotic props you've ever seen. And it's great for immersion and things of that nature. I'm running a Delta Green game currently in person and doing very minimal amount, but it's also on a per scenario basis. So the scenarios are pretty thin and the objectives are pretty straightforward. It's just kind of all the differences of who they talk to and what knowledge they accrue through just the investigation piece.
Right.
It can be, to your point, intense, but I think that could be for anything. It could be D&D.
Sure, yeah.
I'm gonna 3D terrain and get really nuts. Wow, now I don't have this corner, so I got to go and 3D print that thing. And
it's the same impulse, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like the second core component of this long-term prep is know yourself, know thyself, right? What am I going to drive myself to do, and how much of that is actually necessary? Do I need to do more because the play group is continually not understanding what I'm trying to communicate, or they can't identify this NPC from that NPC, or that kind of stuff? Do I need to do more, or do I need to do much less because they're drowning in stacks of documents?
Yeah. One of the things I think, and I don't necessarily, sometimes I don't, you've run Mass and Nyarlathotep.
Yeah.
When I did that campaign, I brought journals and I put them on the table and I said, here's a journal, because I don't want you guys to ask me about 5 NPCs. I want you to
make your own notes, do your own homework.
Right. Make your own notes. I don't care if it's just for you as the player or if it's like something you want to write into your character as they're a journalist and they, keep a journal all the time. Bonus for the latter. But, that's one thing about a longer term campaign is to get a player invested well enough that they are wanting to be able to keep track of some of those things over time, right, which I think is always helpful, especially when prep. We would do recaps and whoever would come up with, the next session and recap that, some people would correct them. So that always helped as well, kind of get people Absolutely. Back on the page, right?
Yeah. It's a really important skill, I think. The pre-game recap and the post-session recap. What have we been doing? And then at the end of the session, what did we do today? And those two memories, I think, are helpful.
One of the things too that I would offer up as far as prep goes, and one of the things I had started doing was I have a video on my YouTube called using capacities, which is a tool, or Notion is another tool. And capacities was interesting, and you could use Obsidian is an open source kind of note-taking markdown type of tool. And what I liked about capacities is it does mind mapping.
Right.
So what you can do and what would help in a Delta Green game is because they can go in any different direction. If you have everything based on a location, then you tie any NPCs to that location. All you have to do, instead of a linear thing, which drives me nuts, and I've talked about this on my stream and podcasts in the past, is, some games we don't like linear, right? Railroad. Oh, railroad. It's a faux pas. You don't do that. Now, there's a difference between railroad and linear. You and I both know, but sometimes they get they're one and not the same. But if you have a scenario, and even if it's a fantasy game, you mind map that out. What happens is, again, if you give the characters enough choices, they could go in different directions. So instead of paging through a book from start to end, right? Start, middle, end, then you're going from actual places, people, things, destined, whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
items, and it's more object based, in which case it's easier to navigate when you need to go to a particular thing. Instead of going through pages, you click on whatever the object is and then you read what's noted there.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
I
like
didn't,
walking through your memory. Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't use that for impossible landscapes, but I think if I did a longer, larger campaign, I would want those relationships mapped
Mm.
out in a way that would be very easy to navigate. Because then if I did it all in advance, then sitting down and they say, well, we're going to go this way or that way, all I would have to do is just click on where they're going and everything that would be there that I need versus paging through a book. Because in Delta Green, they tend to, there are some places, but there's also NPCs. And so they may be separate.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Or it's a separate entry, but the NPC is there. So now I read the destination, Anthony's there, but Anthony's stat block is at the back of the book. It's just
200 pages away.
organizationally, it can be a mess. You know,
Yes, and this was a huge improvement to the seventh edition version of Mass of Nyarlathotep, because they do a lot of that work. There are a lot of connections and refreshers and reminders in helpful places, but that's still more than 600 pages split over two books, and so at a certain point, you need to step in for yourself and make your own, commit it all to memory.
for people that don't know masks, and I always say it wrong. If you've never read that or understand it, it's one of the largest campaigns that's out there. It is literally kind of the campaign to be of all campaigns is
Yeah.
kind of in the industry. But to comment on that, if you get the GM screen for masks,
Yes.
it's not a GM screen that you would find normally. It's not
Per
like,
se. Yeah.
yeah, it's not the skill list and what is the different conditions. It literally has an entire panel of just names and who they are of the
Yes.
people.
It's so cool.
So that's how crazy long and big that campaign is that the GM screen puts the NPC references in the GM screen for that campaign.
Yeah. It's wild. It's wild.
Yeah.
Yes. Globe spanning in a very literal sense.
Yeah.
But all right. So then, let's talk a little bit about characters. The characters start out having been recruited into Delta Green, in this case, or in a more typical Call of Cthulhu scenario, they are usually part of a family or part of a fraternal organization that has maybe some secrets in the background. They're usually quite out of the loop, and then through the death of a friend, the death of a relative, the inheritance of grandpa's weird library, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You're a group of rum runners in the hills who encounter something strange near the still, whatever it is, they get swept up, and much to their detriment in dealing with a cosmically horrible situation. But in Delta Green, and in a sense, they've signed up, they've been recruited for dealing with it, and who they are at the beginning can be tracked and changed. The player can make decisions about how to make their own lives worse in order to vent some of the emotional and psychic trauma that they are experiencing. So there's, as easy it is on the, I don't have to learn what the technology can do or can't do, what does and doesn't exist, like I would have to play in the 1890s or the 1920s or whatever. I do need to think about the characters. So how did that work in the context of running impossible landscapes in particular?
Well, the uniqueness of Delta Green, which you've touched on, is the commonality of experiencing something and then getting recruited. So they are part of Delta Green and they understand what is at stake if somebody doesn't look into things and squash them, and then cover it up and keep it hidden from humanity. So you can get many different types of characters, and
Mm,
many are recruited out of a federal agency typically because in some instances and during the Delta Green timeline, Delta Green relies on those individuals to basically steal or embezzle monies to fund and funnel into Delta Green. Um, Other times it's an official program and sanctioned by the government, so it just depends on when it takes place. So going into the characters, they could be, like I said, we had an anthropologist, we had a U.S. Marshal, we had a U.S. Postal Inspector, we
nice.
had a DNR or a kind of a forestry agent, right? And it first kicks off in New York City. So why would a forestry agent be there? Well, it doesn't really matter. You're Delta Green. Like it's because something bad is going on and they need you to check it out. So those
Right.
dynamics and they may not even be, you know, let's go around and introduce all the characters. Anthony, what are you going to be playing tonight? In Delta Green, you're not going to know who you're really on a mission with because you're not supposed to know.
Right. Don't ask,
And
don't tell.
yeah. And if it comes out through play, that creates a certain dynamic because as your typical bonds whittle down, your significant other, your son or daughter, an organization you're a part of, and you start alienating them because you're trading your sanity to kind of alleviate those bonds, then the bonds of the group become better. You
Yeah.
actually pick up bonds of your party because you're sitting in the
There's no
bar
one else.
commiserating,
Yeah.
right? Nobody else understands. You guys understand. Nobody else does. And so then you form bonds with your fellow agents. But they were coming from all different backgrounds, and they all start relatively quote unquote normal, right? They don't have any, they don't emphasize the habits because those are going to come later, right? Um, when you are dealing with a trauma and you're, turning to substance abuse, it may start out rather benign, and then, by the fifth, sixth, seventh, 10th session, you're a raging alcoholic as a character that presents a different character than when you start the campaign, right?
Right. Yeah. So how important was it to you as the handler in that case to keep track of those changes?
Pretty important. I mean, there are breaking points, which is a game mechanic for sanity. There is becoming immune to certain things, like per, your character can become immune to violence,
Right.
anything sanity that's related to violence. They just
They're numb to it.
they,
Yeah.
they just yeah they've become numb to it. They've seen too much. Um, so it's important to track, but having a good group that leans into those things, the game will shine.
Sure.
Like I said, it takes a specific type of player that wants to play Delta Green to do that. Those that are not wanting the vulnerability or the flaws of a particular character to be part of the role playing experience, they're not going to have a good time in Delta Green at all. Like they're not going to win. They're not going to have happy go lucky moments.
Right.
Um,
The game
so,
system will continually present them
yes,
with reminders of what game they're really playing.
yeah.
Yeah. So is that a part of your early stages of play, talking about expectations for how the players would approach their characters, or was it a hands off, let's see what they do with it kind of thing?
So it is. Let's see. I'm trying to think of everybody who played and their experience. I know Harrigan and Phil were both Delta Green players and game masters. Craig Shipman was also a part of that early on. I don't know if he had played Delta Green. I know he had played Call of Cthulhu, so I don't think the leap was that far. Um, Edwin Nagy, I think he had some experience with Delta Green as well. So I wasn't playing with individuals that were foreign to the Delta Green concept, which was
Right.
nice. But to your point, it would be important to kind of outline that tone. My home group here, nobody's played it, and I'm running it for them. And going through and trying to stress what the game is about and who they are playing and what their role is in the world you can convey that. You can have them read the agent handbook, and it kind of says, literally like a Delta Green agent does this or
Right.
is this. It's it doesn't always sink in,
Well,
right? The
and what?
crash, the crack helicopter pilot,
Right.
great, can work, but if you're doing it from I'm the best and this is why they hire me, that'll crumble apart very quickly.
Right. What's keeping you involved? You know,
Yeah,
and that's necessary. And
right. You could be the best helicopter pilot and you witnessed, a sighting of a UFO when you were young, or your sibling got abducted,
right.
right? Um, and that is bad news, and that's something that keeps you in that loop.
Yeah. Because you want to believe.
That's right. You do believe, like
You do
you
believe.
believe, like I
The
know
truth
this
is out there.
exists. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I ask a lot of these questions because I find that however we prepare, when we're in the moment of play, a lot of what we do as game masters, there's a lot of overlap. The different Venn diagrams of the different types of play we might get into. Our information handling expects us to do a lot of the same things. There's going to be a certain amount of improvisation or tailoring of what was prepared based on how things actually played out. And there's going to be memorization, and there's going to be the implementation of this characterization I envisaged for this particular NPC or whatever. A lot of our skills are going to be the same. But how we get to the point of standing there running the game, there seems to be a lot more variation on how that runs. Like, I don't tend to look at impossible landscapes as something I want to run, or massive Nyarlathotep for that matter. The first time I ran it because it was purchased for me as a gift, and so I felt I had to use it. But coming up, I didn't live near game stores or anything like that, so being able to buy modules was just never on the table. And the few modules that were in our group, we just kind of passed them all around, and I tended to use them to take the map and make something else from it. So my default setting is not to use the published material. And so when I'm listening to your prep, I'm hearing a lot of the important points that are important to me, like the characters and the interesting locations, and to conceive of them as being connected as relationships. This is where the murder took place, and the guy across the street is a potential witness, right? What would he have seen? And thinking about that, and thinking of this as nodes, I guess, and trying to imagine the locations as if I'm there. I'm standing on that street corner across the street from where the murder took place, on the same side of the street as the shopkeeper who maybe witnessed something. So what does that mean I can see, and how will I describe it? My preparation tends to go that way. Plus the system. I like to, did the shopkeeper see something? How much? And then look at his stat block or whatever, and figure out what he can report. And so it's not less time, it's not less intensive mentally, but it comes at it without having to figure out what the writer meant.
That's a good point. I've talked to friends of mine about this too, and I have for a while been involved with running published adventures. They were
Yeah,
kind of the thing I did for quite some time, and I still do to this day. But I find that if I could run without it being published, it, to me, it can, I don't know if it can be a lighter lift necessarily, probably to some degree. And here's kind of the analogy. When you run a published adventure, I think that The prep could be less, but then you have what I would consider chains that are holding you to those points, the plot points, the NPCs, the treasure, the details. And that's all fine and good. So it's almost like you're trading off the prep for memorizing and understanding what you need to present. And that
Right.
could be, if it's in the form of a book, you're paging through that and going through it and reading the passages and hoping that, you know, it works.
It works. There's a certain amount of trust there. Right.
Right. And when you come up, this is kind of interesting because I think there is a published adventure type of scenario. There is you and how you prep a scenario. And then there, I think, is very much more impromptu. So you can
Right.
prep a lot of your own scenario so that it almost comes across as a published adventure, right? You get the characters, the NPCs, what's the shopkeeper see? What don't they see? Where do they go? And then there's more impromptu, right?
Right.
So
Just wing it.
Delta Green, yeah, and Delta Green has shotgun scenarios. They're literally like 3 paragraphs long.
Right.
And the purpose of that is for you to just kind of let it roll. And I've played in ones, but I haven't run one. And when it's funny when you play in one, and if you have a good game master, you'll never know that it was literally a 3 paragraph session or
Right.
scenario because they just kind of roll with which way the players go. And that lift can be really free for a game master if they feel confident enough. Because I think the
Yeah.
anxiety with game mastering comes with, do I have all the answers that they're going to come up with? And if
Right.
I don't, I need them. And that's why I'm going to read this book or I'm going to make all my notes. And so when you come up with the answer in the moment and it works and nobody knows the difference, like, why haven't I been doing this all my life?
There's that. One of the weird things that happened to me living over here after I've been living in Korea for a while, I never used to make like lists of NPC names. I would improvise that in the moment. I would just think more about who they were as a person. How are they different from this other NPC? How is that bartender different from this bartender? Or how is this cabbie different from the other cabbie? If a name came up, I just was sure that I'd be able to think of a name. But after a while living over here, I couldn't think of Western or European names.
Oh,
I wasn't hearing them as
right.
constantly, and in those days I didn't have much time or interest in having a lot of TV stations and whatnot. So I was watching a lot of old movies. So they're very cliche names. Well, the cab driver shouldn't be Sam Spade, and shouldn't be Sam Spade more than once. you know? And coincidentally, this cab driver is also called Sam Spade.
Could be the same cab. You never know.
Yeah, it's the same cab. So this really started to weigh on my mind as I got into the sessions. Like, well, what if they ask their names? And so, like, do I have to make these? And then where did I put the list of names? This really started to bother me. Whereas the idea of running the shotgun scenario, except the part about the names, I know how government red tape works and how police procedure works, and so we've got this location. I've been to locations like that. I've got no concerns about improvising that in the moment until they say, "Well, what was the police officer's name?" Or I look at the waitress's name tag. It's like, Brenda.
Yeah. And if you play in our groups, you that is inevitable. That is going to happen, right?
They like to push you on names, or the names are preposterous. Both.
I usually have names down okay. They will inevitably press on names. Um, I think the key, if the NPC plays any relevance, if the GM knows
Let's
their
give
name.
it a name, or if they have a picture that pops up.
It's going to be Patrick. What's the waiter's name? Patrick. Get it down because they're going to ask Patrick a question or run into him in a session or two, right? So
Right,
usually
the
names
waiter
are
in your
okay.
lodge.
Yeah, names are okay. Usually I can use real combinations of people I know that aren't playing the game, right? Use a good way of using names is just think of other people, but don't give the full name. Just give their first name and then use the last name of another person.
Right. Yeah.
So
In the Call of Cthulhu campaign that we're still running on the channel now, which is quite immense. As a kind of push to myself, I refused to give myself a list of names. So I've got to get over this particular thing. But at the same time, I also, during the initial NPC preparation, I gave a lot of them the same names, like the most common names that come to my mind. I used them all up. So I got a variety of Edwards and a variety of Stellas and quite a few Johns and all the names that initially I've used them all up. I can't use them anymore. I can't use them to improvise. I have to find somebody else's name. So it's entertaining for me, at least. But to kind of bring things around with long form preparation, we've got tonight's preparation for tonight's session, but we also have the future ahead of us. Right. Those two different things. So if you were running something like Impossible Landscapes tonight, what would you want to have ready so that you felt comfortable running the game?
I would
Let's say it's
probably,
online with VTT.
yeah, I would probably want some handy references. So if I ran a VTT, I had each character sheet at my disposal so I could see everything of theirs. And because that's important at Delta Green, because you don't have to make them roll if they're at a certain skill level.
Right.
So I don't even ask them if I know
Right.
what their skill is. Because when you do ask them, to me, I think it breaks a little bit of immersion. So if I just know that they're looking at something and they have a score of 80, I just tell them.
Tell them what they see. Yeah. You're their senses. Yeah.
And I don't have to tell them why they see it because I already know why they have that skill. And if they put it two and two together, great. But it's just a subtle nuance.
Yeah. It's
But
important.
yeah, and then I would have those things up. I would probably have some handouts that would be maybe pertinent to the first session, maybe even going into session two. And if I got really ambitious, just go nuts on the handouts, cut them out, put them in a folder, and know where they are and sort them out by location, what have you. So when they go there, I can just show it to them. And then I think just knowing the scenario and how it flows, the different, like where in Delta Green, it's usually after the briefing, they have maybe two, maybe three options after a mission, mission briefing's given to them. Might even be just one. Like, here's the deal. Go find out. Right.
Right.
Last things last. It's going
Right.
to
Go to the
essentially
apartment.
going to the apartment building. Right. From there, who knows what's going to happen. Right. And then I think it's also important to understand what specific prompts you need to inject to get them to go into other directions, specifically a Delta Green or an investigative game, right? You can't put the clue behind a skill check. And so sometimes it may not even be putting it behind a skill check. It may be just they're never going to find it because they went to the high school and the high school is nowhere in your scenario. So
Right.
how do
Yeah.
you get them back to look at where, the dead guy is in a bathtub?
Right.
And so then
Because you can't just move him and his bathtub into the high school. That
right, right. Or how do you make it strange or weird? Something that was, well, it's not even in the playbook, right? It's not in my outline. It's like completely something they came up with. And you don't want to blow it off like, that's fine. You go there, you don't really find anything. I mean, you could. It's an approach.
right.
Um, but also, they go there and people start acting weird. They don't get the answers they want, but they know something's wrong and strange. Uh, or they mumble something. Um, I mean, it's funny. You laugh, but it's just they mumble three things, like, and they just get hooked on that. And then have another person they talk to mumble the same things. Oh, what
Yeah.
is so
Weird.
significant at the gas station? Why is everybody talking about the gas station? And they just inevitably go to the gas station and find out. Right.
Yeah.
I think those are the things, other than session zero and outlining what the game's about and the tone and the subject matter and what you're supposed to do as a player character in the game. I think it's those components. Where are they going to go? The first few options. understanding what that looks like, um, and knowing that it probably won't go beyond that too far because they may explore option one and then they'll go back and explore option two and three.
Right.
So they're not going further down the path. They're just backtracking and going back down a different path.
Right. Once the campaign is in motion, you get a sense about how people play and if their enjoyment is coming from going to the apartment or following leads from the apartment, arriving at the new location and playing their characters like real time through that investigation. And it doesn't matter that the time limit for tonight's session runs out before they go to a new location. They accomplish what they were there for, versus the type that wants to get a lot of stuff done. Okay, so we went to the apartment. We found the keys to the cabin. And then we moved on. When I played through that scenario, by the way, it was intense. The way the game master, a friend of ours, Eloy Centroni, has the Umbermancer YouTube channel, the way that he ran it, the sadness in the Bowman apartment was palpable, and we're all seeing our future as we move through this place and digging through the closet and it was just from the very beginning, and then talking to the lonely neighbor, and then finding his this, that, and the other thing, and no spoilers, but we got a lot of play out of just standing in a room, is what I'm trying to say, rather than quick, to the Batmobile, let's rush off into the
Well, and the tricky thing with some games, like in some traditional fantasy games, it's not recommended to split the party. And because those games are typically based on party composition, you need the strengths of, you need a healer, you need a tank, you need, the caster. In Delta Green and some modern games, it's not only an okay thing, it can be encouraged, right? Now, if you're going to go and talk to, a witness, an eyewitness, you usually don't do it with 5 people.
5 guys, yeah. Can we all come in for tea?
Yeah, there's usually not that. Although in Delta Green, there will inevitably be the party that just goes, well, I think we should all go and interrogate this witness with 5 people. But splitting up the party is a natural thing, and it's not going to throw things sideways because somebody didn't have anthropology when they needed it at a particular scenario, because they can just go back and pull that person back in or convey the information.
Just show the video from their they can stream it from their site on video call.
Right. Yeah. And but that also creates another piece where those the path 1, 2, and 3 can be done very quickly. I mean, quickly as in pursued, but it will take time to coordinate the splitting of the party, which will take up a session as you play group 1 going down path 1 and group 2 going path 2, right?
And I like to rapidly cut in between, and
you got to do it at right key moments. Like the person enters the room. Okay, now let's go over to you and talk to you guys. You're standing in front of this person, blah, blah, blah. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. He pulls out a gun. Okay, now I'm going to cut over to you guys.
Yeah. No, I definitely prefer to give players the opportunity to not know things that their characters weren't present for.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That's a preference I have. But when we began our ongoing Call of Cthulhu campaign, that's how it was done. I had a set block of time where I was always available, which is very rare. And so as they separated and went their separate ways, we booked sessions for that so that only they had access to that information. Then they would come together again, and do they tell, do they not tell, and how do they interpret it? Loved it. Later on in the campaign, I would just have to have all of them present, 5 or 6 guys present, and they got just as much enjoyment out of hearing what they didn't know, and they had some fun pretending they didn't know, but it's not the same experience.
Yeah, that's awesome if you could pull it off. It's not easy, but yeah.
All right. So when you reach your end of Impossible Landscapes, what was your after action report for yourself about that experience? Like, how much of it did you use, and how satisfying was it? Kind of stuff.
Yeah. We as a group did come together and talk about the campaign, and I'm always hesitant about giving the player spoilers or reflecting back upon things because I like to like keep them out there. So I usually ask if they do you really want to know what was kind of going on? Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're never going to read the thing. They're never going to play it again. So I sometimes go that route. Other times we'll talk about how some things make sense and how some things didn't make sense. Like Delta Green, you often run into this because you may be running a mission or an operation, and you run under the covers of your Delta Green. It's on the down low. It's
Right.
covert.
You don't have your badge.
You don't
Step
have your
aside,
badge.
man.
You have your badge, but you're not using it for the right reasons, typically. And so there is some scenarios where they're like, well, the character should just, if they run into this, they should contact their handler, and then the CDC will come in and they should, order an airstrike. They can go to the next Air Force base, contact the colonel, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Usually Delta Green is not wanting any of that to happen. They don't want that attention. So there's really some scenarios that are not, it will confuse players because they'll be like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't think we're supposed to do that. So they don't. And that's
Right.
the solution to the scenario, if you will. But sometimes what we'll talk about is some of those details, like, I don't know what we were supposed to do if this whole place is infected. You know, I think we did what we needed to, or what have you. And so I think it's more hashing some of those things out that were throughout the scenario, or somebody will come up with something that says, you know, I was kind of stuck here. Was that the right way or the right direction to go? And there really isn't a wrong answer, a right answer necessarily in RPGs.
Yeah, we kind of have to get into appropriate
Yes.
versus inappropriate kind of thing.
Yeah,
And,
that's a good way to put it.
yeah,
And
airstrike.
some of them will be, yeah, air, blow everything up, right? That's the solution. Burn it down, blow it up, you know,
Yeah.
deny, right? Um, I think at the end of Impossible Landscapes, we didn't really get to like the final where I was reading the last passage, and that's what happens. It was very much impromptu because they got into a firefight that did not go well at all. And in Delta Green, when you pull a gun, there's trouble. Like you're gonna,
Right.
somebody's gonna get seriously injured, and one of the guys the characters kind of went unconscious, lost their, but I had them wake up uh, in a mental institute,
Right.
and they were visited by people that they had met during the scenario, uh, to include one of the other characters that was going there to visit them.
Hmm.
They would mumble certain things that they would encounter that may or may not have existed.
Nice.
And see, right? Like,
Yeah, that's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. In my runnings of Masks of Nyarlathotep / Nyarlathotep, take your pick. I've never had a group successfully go from the opening through to the end.
Hmm.
I have had what felt like conclusions, though. Right? They felt like they had done what they were trying to do. And I've had groups pass the torch, troop style, to other characters that we had built. We created a stable of characters at the beginning, involved a bunch of them in the opening of Masks, and they went as far as they could, being followed behind by the other characters, who then found them in mental institutions or hospitals or wherever, to pick up the quest, which doesn't feel the same way. But the most satisfying run of it I had was to have totally different groups of players. Not in connection with each other, with their own characters, start them at different points around the world at different points in time, and they stumble across the shenanigans of that particular campaign, and then they start working from that point. toward each other. And then a little later, I started a group in a traditional beginning in New York and sent them off. And the idea was that they would all kind of come together. It's great fun.
That would be a very cool losty heroes type. Everybody's brought together for some weird reason. They like strangely coincidental air quotes.
Yeah, you can do it that way too.
Yeah.
What was in my mind was that as that traditional group starting at the traditional start point makes their way through, and they're being eroded by the events that they're going through, there are survivors from the other groups who are there and ready to be played by people who can just tell them from their own personal experience what's going on in Cairo or Kenya or whatever. And, yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on to talk to me about the differences in these kind of esoteric, cosmically horrible, long form campaigns. Because, the opinion out there is really that go mad or die is the end result of cosmic horror play. There aren't really any long form play scenarios. You can't have an open-ended campaign, and that's, in my experience, not true. And I felt that maybe you think so also. It's not true.
No, it's not. It's not. It's the journey, It doesn't have to be all. I mean, they're nihilistic games, right? There's a lot of helplessness in some of these games, but it is
But
really
it's the fun kind of helplessness.
It's kind of the fun kind, and taking it for what it is. And I don't know. I played Call of Cthulhu once, and it was very late in life, honestly. And when all things considered, like I poo-pooed it when I was growing up. It wasn't an interest of mine. And then even when I got back into gaming after, I don't know, 10, 15-year hiatus, I played it because I hadn't played it ever, and I wanted to give it a shot. And it was like it was a game day at a local game store, and I knew the person that was going to run it. There's some of the game hole guys, actually, when they would run games at a local game store before the conventions. And I was like, dude, this is awesome, because it just provides more role playing.
Yeah.
It's playing more of a role than probably most of the other games I've ever played before. And that's something that I really loved doing. And even playing with randos, it wasn't that big a deal, because the party was kind of random to some degree,
Often.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The debutante, the rich guy,
the PI.
the PI, the boxer. Like, why are these all three coming together and investigating? And then, it was just another type of game. And I had a good appreciation. And then when I tripped up on Delta Green, I was all in. That's, I never looked into it. Yeah, I was never into it. Well, I mean, it was a Call of Cthulhu supplement, so why would it hit my radar if I wasn't even interested in COC? So,
yeah, and back when it originally came out, a lot of people either loved it because it wasn't normal Call of Cthulhu, or they took it too far and said, "Well, it's just shotguns versus Shoggoths." It's not real. But I think Arc Dream has demonstrated that there's a tremendous amount of real, Lovecraftian mythocycle horror present in it, and they've given you a lot of space to explore that, and the structures to explore it long term, so you can really, enjoy the experience of this modern day altruist,
right.
working for Delta Green.
Yeah.
All right. So, what's ahead for you, Sean?
Well, again, streaming this Saturday, every Saturday. So if you wake up and you're bored, if you're in the US, and grab a cup of coffee. And if you're somewhere else like Anthony, you might be grabbing a beer or some late night drink, show up and have a good time. Otherwise, BSRCon, which is an online convention that I hold for the BS Landia Discord, which is a community that was kind of brought together from Gaming and BS, is in January. I believe the dates haven't been locked down, but I think it'll be the third week in January. Anybody's welcome to join. We use tabletop events to manage all those events. variety of different games and different play styles, and just good people wanting to play some some of the some popular role playing games. And the thing I have to say about BSerCon is we probably have more different games. We very like I think one year we had like 3 Savage Worlds games. Otherwise, there wasn't a single duplicate system out of 50.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. I will probably talk to you on Saturday.
Awesome. It'll be good to see you. And then check out GoBag at gobagpod.com.
Absolutely. All right. Until the next time, folks, take care.